Access to affordable credit helps me pay my employees, but I don't really need it.
Inflation is killing me. But who cares? Big retailers are making record profits. That's why we support the Durbin Marshall credit card bill.
See? Banks and credit unions help small businesses make payroll. This bill would cut the vital resources they need,
While increasing megastore profits. They deserve it, don't they?
Tell Congress, stop the Durbin Marshall money grab for corporate megastores.
Paid for by the Electronic Payments Coalition.
Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Stacy.
And we make Trashy Divorces, everybody's favorite good podcast about bad relationships.
Looking for something true crimey without the gore or the body count?
We've been churning out funny, feisty, feminist episodes since 2019. So if you're looking to put some scandalous stories told well into your ears this summer, check out Trashy Divorces, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Trust us, we've covered someone you love.
Or someone you love to hate.
Hello and welcome to the Irish NFL Show. My name is Shane Brennan and thank you very much for joining us as we continue our coverage of this off-season period and that nice little sweet spot between when free agency starts and looking ahead to the NFL draft. So I'm delighted to have from NFL Network's The Insiders, Tom Pelissero, joining us on the show. Tom, good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, Shane. You're right. This is like, if there is a lull, it's right now, but it's not much one. The league meeting is next week. The draft is 4 weeks away. It never really ends.
It's funny, like for a sport that only plays the game on the field for half the year, there's never really a lull. It's never supposed to break. And I must wonder what it's like for you, obviously, as a member of the Insiders, as somebody who you break so much of the news when it comes to all of these trades and free agents that we're talking about. Like, do you have like a little X in your calendar for that first Monday? You're looking ahead towards that moment as being, yes, this is really time for me to shine.
I mean, there are those in terms of like free agency week. I mean, absolutely, it's every year. It's the highest stress time of the year, and you kind of have to trust your process and know what the things are that people you think are going to care about the most. Be ready to, play whack-a-mole with other things you're not expecting to come up, and then be able to, take a deep breath when you get a text out of the blue saying something that you weren't really prepared for and be like, okay, here we go. Those are fun. Anytime, it doesn't happen often, but anytime that you see, I'll put out a news tweet that doesn't have a picture with it. That means in one regard or another, I didn't think it was coming right then. It means I wasn't quite anticipating the other side of a trade, things like that. Most of the time I'm pretty on top of it, but some of those ones that fall out of the sky are the most fun.
I guess that's a nice little trick. I'll have to keep an eye out for that, by the way. The next time something comes out and there's no picture, I'm like,
there were a couple trades this year where I could have done a little better. There was one at the Combine. Jermaine Johnson got traded from the Jets to the Titans for T'Vondre Sweat. And if you saw that tweet, I didn't have a photo. Well, I had photos of Jermaine Johnson and T'Vondre Sweat. I didn't have one of them together. And then when I get the word, there was not enough time in there to get a whole Photoshop mashup. So sometimes those happen. Other times, I find out, Michael Pittman's been traded to the Steelers, and even though I was ready for that, it was one of those, I didn't have the tweet totally typed up, so I was just like, all right, source, Pittman to the Steelers, done. We're done. We're moving on. I'm not going to go and risk losing this on, trying to pull up the photo. So again, it's fun. It's a lot. I mean, we're on 12 hours straight, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday during free agency frenzy. There's never been another year in my, this is anecdotal, but like, I don't think there's ever been a year with close to as many signings, even on the very first day of the free agent negotiating window. That made it, fast and frantic. Tuesday felt comparatively slow until we wrap up our 12 hours of coverage and find out Maxx Crosby trade is off. That then triggered another hour of TV and a lot of scrambling to figure out what was going on there. So there's always something, man. It's a league with, at this time of year, close to, by the offseason, 3,000 players, 1,700 the rest of the year. It's probably a pretty small fraction of those that people really, really care at a high level about. But anytime, every trade seems like a big deal, every, surprise thing that happens, it's fun to cover. But I'd be lying if I didn't say, it was stressful.
Yeah, well, listen, you do a great job, and like I was saying, we tried to do our best to do like a live show at the end of the first Monday of free agency frenzy, and we were like, we were struggling to keep up. I can't imagine what it must have been like for you. Let's talk about that Maxx Crosby one, because the trade that wasn't a trade, which ended up really sort of shocking the ecosystem when that happened. I mean, we could talk about actually what happened on the day, but I'm more interested now in what the future now is for Maxx Crosby and whether there is still a market for him. Has this experience in Baltimore dented his availability if he is going to end up being traded elsewhere? I'm just interested to know, is there a market now for Maxx Crosby?
There's still a market for Maxx Crosby. There are still teams calling and keeping tabs on Maxx Crosby. I don't believe that in the big picture, there's a whole lot that even happens to his value in a trade. Short term, it just raises a lot of questions, right? If a team backs away ostensibly, according to what the Ravens told the Raiders, based on what they told Max, based on what Eric DeCosta said publicly, it was about the medical, and they weren't comfortable with it. There were a lot of people within the league I talked to that felt like this was on the Ravens, that you have a known injury, a meniscus repair surgery. He was 8 weeks into what is, generally a 4 to 6 month recovery. And, that essentially it should be buyer beware. Instead, they decided, they didn't feel good about the health of the knee. But I think the part that gets misconstrued here is they didn't discover something with the knee that's like it's career ending. Like every now and then you'll have somebody who will get like, they'll go for a physical and they'll have like a heart arrhythmia, right? And like, you got to go get that treated, and that could be, or something with your spine. Everyone knew the injury. He was on the injury report all season, didn't practice a whole lot, got shut down, ended on IR. He took photos before, during, and after the surgery. And he's 8 weeks into the recovery here. This was not about, can he play right now? This is about the Ravens and their evaluation of what I would say is the medium term. It's not long term with a 28-year-old player. It's not like a guy coming out in the draft where, what teams will say is like, oh, he's got a, bad knee. He's a one contract player. Like he can play the next 4 years, but not beyond that. For Max, he probably only has 3 to 4 years left in his prime. And they still decided that it was not, something that they were going to move forward with here. But nobody, including the Ravens, certainly not any doctor, said Max can't play football this year. Maxx Crosby's going to be playing in week 1. He's still a hell of a player. He has, from my understanding, the things he has said publicly match what he said privately. When he went back in the building that next day, 5 a.m. or whatever to work out, it was telling the GM, John Spytek, and telling Clint Kubiak and, Rob Leonard and everybody else. They're like, hey, Mark Davis as well. Like, I'm a Raider. I want to be here. He is not trying to get out. At this point, the only question really now is what do the Raiders do? Because they were not planning to have Maxx Crosby there. They were not budgeting. They can handle it, but they were not budgeting for another $30 million in cash and cap space that they're going to have to deal with here. And they're going to keep getting calls. I would anticipate that on some level, it could heat up before the draft, at least in terms of those calls. It could heat up again in June, July, when he's actually going to be fully, recovered in terms of his timeline and be getting back to being able to do football drills again, all of which is a long way of saying there's absolutely still a market out there. Maxx Crosby, one way or another, is going to be playing football in September. If I had to guess, if I had to lean one way or the other, I'd say the most likely scenario is he's playing for the Raiders again, which is a pretty unbelievable development that not just he would don that uniform again, but that he would do it willingly and embrace being with the Raiders. That's kind of what this entire experience has done in terms of changing the way that he's looking at things, and we'll see how exactly in the big picture the Raiders look at things when they figure out, okay, what is the best offer we're going to get again as we continue to take calls on his availability.
And just briefly on how the league views Baltimore now in terms of how they've acted. I mean, there's so much noise and frenzy coming out of this at the time as to whether Baltimore acted in bad faith or whether it's just a doctor just view things differently. Now that it's a couple of weeks has passed by, is there a sense of almost buyer beware in terms of anybody making deals with Baltimore now?
We'll see that, in the coming months and years, really. I definitely had people make comments to me about that. One high profile agent who said, unless they're the last team, I won't send a player there. Just because they don't, trust, because everything in the, the negotiating window in particular is based on trust. It's, undrafted free agency is the same thing. Like, you're agreeing, but you can't sign anything. You got to pass a physical. And if people start to have concerns that they're going to be really aggressive about things, just like there have been teams in the past that have reputations for putting injury waivers on a lot of guys, things like, hey, we don't feel good about either of your knees. We need a waiver on both your knees or we're not going to sign you. And there's some teams that are more aggressive about doing that. The Ravens, it should be noted, they're within their rights. There were no trade papers. They had a pre-trade agreement that allowed them to give Maxx Crosby a physical, and it was within their rights to say, we don't feel comfortable enough on that physical to send you 2 first-round picks. Again, I heard from a lot of current and former GMs who all did not feel that this was how the Ravens should have proceeded here. I get the Ravens' standpoint in terms of, they felt like this was not what they were expecting. But, realistically, it's like, what should they have been expecting 8 weeks post-op on a 28-year-old player with a lot of wear and tear on a known knee injury? That's where you get into a little bit of a gray area. And we'll find out the next time they try to do a big deal in the negotiating window. We'll find out the next time that they try to execute a trade. We might find out in undrafted free agency after the draft if they're trying to get somebody and an agent just goes, my guy's had a knee injury in the past. I don't trust you. I'm going to send him someplace else. Those are real things that could happen. Do they have a massive impact on business?
O'Reilly. Check engine, ABS, or maintenance light on? Take the guesswork out of your warning lights with O'Reilly Veriscan. The service is free and provides a report with solutions verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we could recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
This is Mike Boileau of Lexicon Valley.
And I'm Bob Garfield. Are you one of those people who sometimes uses words?
Do you communicate or acquire information with, language?
Hey, us too. So join us on Lexicon Valley to chew over the history, culture, and many mysteries of English, plus some wisecracks.
Find us on one of those apps where people listen to podcasts.
Can't say that, but it's certainly something that I think a lot of people within the league will be monitoring moving forward here.
That's very interesting. Let's talk about one of the other big trades that sort of caught a lot of people's eye, and that's the move of Jaylen Waddle from Miami to Denver. I think what really caught the eye is the amount of capital that Denver put forward to make this trade happen, including a first-round pick, third-round pick from this year, and they swapped fourth-round picks, but I think it ended up benefiting Miami as well in that one. We could talk about the Miami Exodus in a second, but in terms of just the value on this, I mean, did you get a sense that this is what the market level for Jaylen Waddle is, the first round pick? Like, a lot of Denver fans are looking at this and saying, we haven't necessarily always had a huge amount of draft capital to work with, and we're sending a lot here for a guy, an aggressive move for a team who are this close to making the Super Bowl, which I guess is understandable. But it's in terms of what they spent in order to get it. Do you feel like that is a good value for the Denver Broncos?
Well, first of all, you asked about stories of breaking news, so let me give you a quick one here. It was the Monday after free agency. I went and got a new phone. I hadn't got a new phone in years. We've got some things going on with the business side where I needed to move my phone number. So I got a new phone, which meant, if you're familiar with how Twitter X works, if you switch devices, you have to recreate all of your drafts. And I keep all these drafts in there for exactly that reason, to fire. So I had recreated all my drafts. What I hadn't done was turn off the undo post thing, which has a delay on it, which is automatic in Twitter or in X. So I get the text on Jaylen Waddle's been traded. I'm ready. It's the top draft I've got. I'm ready for it. And I hit it. And not only did I have the undo post on, but maybe because it was the first one I had sent since getting the new phone, that thing stuck for like 25 seconds and it was painful. I am telling you, I'm sitting there going, like, why is it going so slow? And it's just like ticking along in the circle. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this. We still broke it, but it was like, that was a bit of a heart-pounding moment right there. In terms of the value for the Broncos getting Jaylen Waddle, I would put it to you this way. And I know the Broncos fans, some media were up in arms of, you're a step away from the Super Bowl and you don't make any moves. They were the only team that hadn't signed an an unrestricted free agent from the outside. I was looking at it knowing that they were in talks going, okay, they're clearly waiting to make this big move. But what they seem to have come to the conclusion on was the whole offseason, what they were looking for was an offensive playmaker. They got J.K. Dobbins back. That was significant. But whether it was running back, wide receiver, tight end, they just needed one more piece to put around Bo Nix. Of course, Davis Webb has taken over the play calling. And because the Broncos, they've drafted really well. George Payton's built a really strong roster. They don't have a ton of holes. They also have a bunch of young guys that they are and will be paying. They weren't going to compete for like Alec Pierce at crazy numbers that he got to go back to the Colts. And with the 30th overall pick, you probably didn't feel like there was like an instant difference maker type of dude that you were going to get there. So there was a lot of back and forth about what the value was going to be in the Waddle trade. By doing that, I understand it from Miami's standpoint. You're figuring it's going to be a couple of years of rebuilding. And in that time, like Jaylen Waddle is going to be 29, 30 before we're really competing again. So the value is never going to be higher than it is right now. But from the Broncos standpoint, they're like a late first round pick. And then, it's a 3 and a 4, and there was a 4 going back. It's a pick swap. But basically they got the equivalent of like the 25th overall pick, which is right in line with what Hollywood Brown was traded for in the draft 4 years ago. It makes total sense. Like, we can get into like the value of like, was it really worth? All I would say is this: 27 years old, speed threat receiver, big play threat. Those guys don't grow on trees. You weren't going to be able to get that guy they didn't think in the draft. There was not, outside of Alec Pierce, who again got way more money to go back to the Colts. This was the best option. They pursued it. Other teams have made a run at it last year during the season. The Dolphins had a big offer out for Waddle, the Bills had a big offer out for Waddle at the trade deadline. The Dolphins ultimately decided they didn't want a first-round pick next year, and they didn't want to trade him in the division. In the end, they got a little bit better compensation by waiting with a new regime in, that's really trying to build this thing the right way from the ground up. And, if you're taking this as a signal from the Broncos, it's, we are going for it right now. Like, there is no bones about it. You make a trade like this, I hate to say, it's the proverbial missing piece, but that's what it looks like, man. Like, there wasn't a lot of other stuff. They're going to obviously be in the draft here with a more limited arsenal of picks, but it was clear this was the target. They wanted an offensive playmaker. They got a really intriguing one in Jaylen Waddle, who you would think in that offense is going to have even more opportunities than he did in Miami.
Let's talk about a couple of teams that are trying to make a turnaround based on free agency. We saw last year the New England Patriots that have spent heavy and spent big, and they managed to get forward to the Super Bowl. We see this year the fact that the Raiders, as we were alluding to earlier, are bringing in a lot of talent. And they might have been budgeting for that with Maxx Crosby being gone. But the New York Jets are another team as well who are bringing in a lot of veteran talent, trying to change something up. We know, of course, they struggled in various different aspects of the game last year, not only in quarterback play. Justin Fields, of course, gone to presumably be a backup in Kansas City. They brought back in Geno Smith, but in defense as well. So do you like what the kind of moves that the Jets are making? Do you think that they are seeing what their division rivals are doing and saying, hey, I think this is time for us to try and make a push and try to bring in some sort of veteran heft into our locker room?
Well, I think that's the key point, which was they brought in older players. Normally with teams in rebuild mode, you don't see them trading for a 36-year-old quarterback. You don't see them sign a 37-year-old linebacker like Demario Davis. I think they brought in David Onyemata, who's on like his 4th contract in the NFL. Those are unusual types of moves, but it reminds me a little of what Houston did in the early going when Nick Caserio got there, which was what they really did was they took all these guys who were getting offered the same minimum type contracts, veteran players, all getting offered like $1 million, and they gave them like 2 or 3. They gave him a little more money. Hey, let's come. What they're trying to do is raise the floor. They're trying to get guys to come in, the right cultural fits, set a tone, get us up to a level of core competency. Demario Davis can still play. I mean, he's at his age. They gave him a 2-year deal, which I know is what Demario wanted. Like, if he was going to play, he wanted a 2-year deal and a real commitment going back to his original NFL team, which is pretty cool. But, he maybe is somebody that everybody can take cues from in terms of like, this is the way that we're going to play. And AG knew him from the New Orleans days. AG's taken over the play calling now, Aaron Glenn. And then Geno coming in, there's, again, like a core competency there. Last year was rough for a lot of reasons in Las Vegas, but he didn't have Garrett Wilson on that team. The Jets feel like he didn't have he had Ashton Genty, obviously. Genty's got a chance to be really, really good. They didn't have a great run plan for him. You have Breece Hall, who was one of the big things that they did early on, at least tagging him and buying themselves time. He'll be on the roster in 2026. This is clear. Like, the Jets they got 5 first-round picks between 2 this year and 3 next year. You're probably finding your quarterback of the future in 2027. That was strategic. In the Quinnen Williams trade, they actually were offered initially a 2026 first-rounder. They actively wanted a 2027 first-rounder, which, if you go by how organizations traditionally have approached that, that's like a downgrade of a round if you're talking about a future first-round pick. But the reason they did that is because the 2027 draft, both a quarterback and overall, is regarded as a stronger draft than the 2026 draft. So get most of our ammunition out next year, but we still have got a lot of ammunition that we can work with this year. So you've kind of got a 2-track plan here where essentially what they're signaling to me is we're going to build this the right way. But we also know we can't have another season like last year. We can't be one of the worst teams in football. We can't somehow have 0 takeaways the entire season, which is basically impossible. We have to get back to just playing a certain way. And so, they made some moves like trading Jermaine Johnson. That was also a look to the future. He wasn't necessarily a great fit with the way that Aaron Glenn wants to play with, his defense now. You get a guy in Devondre Sweat who's pretty rare as a nose tackle, who hopefully you think is going to come in hungry and ready to have a good year for you. It's all with an eye out toward building this thing the right way in years to come. But bringing in that veteran presence not only can have an impact on some other guys, but you would hope is going to be able to help you win enough games that there's not a feeling like this isn't going fast enough. We got to make more significant changes in an offseason where they already moved on from both their coordinators and are really starting over in a lot of ways.
Thank you very much for taking the time. One final thing, I guess, before I let you go is, of course, the other New York team, the Giants. People are wondering, and we have a lot of New York Giants fans in Ireland, and people are sitting back and wondering, what is the Harbaugh effect? What is it looking like? And people are looking at the trades they've made in terms of bringing in Isaiah Likely, Tremaine Edmonds coming in from the Bears as well. Darnell Mooney was a recent acquisition for them as well. Are these the kind of players we can expect from a sort of Harbaugh rebuild in New Jersey?
It's going to be really interesting to see how this entire thing plays out because, John Harbaugh is used to being around a young quarterback with a lot of swag. He had that in Lamar Jackson. Now he's got it in Jackson Dart. They obviously always had, a very physical, disciplined type of an approach to the game, a philosophy. And they were good at running the football. Cam Scadaboo is healing. They continue to make additions to that position. They've got guys like Malik Neighbors. They feel like they've got weapons to work with. Darnell Mooney and Calvin Austin, those were like low budget, low risk, high reward type of signings. But what this is going to look like with John Harbaugh, if you look at the makeup of his staff, he's certainly hoping that it looks a lot like, what it did in Baltimore. There's a lot of familiar faces there. Matt Nagy, the OC, comes from Kansas City. But if you think about like the way that they play with Patrick Mahomes, I thought Matt Nagy would have been a logical fit to work with Lamar Jackson too, depending how, some different things happened in terms of, the hirings and who got a head coaching job and who didn't, just because, you're talking about working with a mobile quarterback who also can be a really good passer. Lamar had to grow into that. Jackson Dart's got some growth to do in that front as well. He's clearly got to protect himself. But there's, they had a vibe to him. I know last year was just kind of a disaster from a wins and losses perspective and people getting fired. But they were a fun team for a while there, that I think it was a Thursday night game that they won. And you're like, yeah, these guys are, I get it. They're like the Gen Z team and Scadaboo's kind of crazy. And, Dart, he's got to stop, treating his helmet like a torpedo and trying to, jump into people. But yeah, they've got talent. I mean, defensively, the front, all the pass rushers, we'll see what happens with Kayvon Thibodeau. But Brian Burns is a really good player. Dexter Lawrence, I know last year wasn't his best, but he's still a really good player. You got Abdul Carter, all the discipline things that happen there. Maybe John Harbaugh coming in helps. I would just say, I used it earlier with Geno Smith about the core competency. It's the same thing with John Harbaugh. You're not going to be a 5-win team with John Harbaugh. It would shock me. He is immediately going to establish a program there. You've seen it with all the things that they've already done programmatically, staffing and everything else. That division right now, if you look at it, the Eagles, in my mind, are just always the team to beat just because they have such consistency programmatically. The Cowboys, are putting a ton into the defense now after last year was geared around getting Pickens and the offense rolling. And then the Commanders, they're probably not as good as they were in 2024. They're not as bad as they were in 2025 with Jaden Daniels and everybody else hurt. They're going to be tough. So it's not a cakewalk by any stretch in the NFC East. But, at a time where the Eagles do have some things that they're working through, including A.J. Brown. There's no reason. I would just say this. John Harbaugh is walking in that building every day going, how are we going to be NFC East champions? Not 3 years from now, right now. There's a baseline of talent, young guys in that building. He feels good about the staff that they were able to assemble here. I think that they're going to be one of the bigger stories in football this season, especially if, Dart and Scadaboo and Neighbors, all those guys, they've all got really cool flashes. They've also been hurt a lot. If those guys can stay healthy and on the field, they're going to be an interesting team to watch in 2026.
Yeah, that Thursday night win you were referring to there against the Eagles is one of those things. You're like, this feels like such a youthful, exuberant team. It's like, if only we could see more of them, and that would be such a.
And then they went right back to playing like they did, and everything changed. Like that's the roller coaster you ride a little bit. But that game always will stick out with me. I was filling in for Rich Eisen the next day. We talked about it. It was like, you can see it. You can see it. So we'll see if we can see it more consistently this year.
Perfect. Well, listen, I'll let you get back to with your new phone, and hopefully the X and everything is working all well for you.
I hadn't told that story before, so you got an original right there. That was a stressful moment.
There we go. It's Irish NFL Show exclusive. Tom Pelissero, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, I'm Josh Spiegel, host of the podcast Lunatic in the Newsroom. If you enjoy journalism that drifts into mild panic, wild overthinking, and a guaranteed nervous breakdown, Lunatic in the Newsroom is for you. It's news like you've never heard before. The only newsroom with a panic button. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and gasp in horror as the show spirals completely out of control. It's not just news, it's emotionally unstable. Lunatic in the Newsroom. Listen today.